There's so much pleasure around us, and that's so deeply connected to the sacred, which we know as rabbis, like the Judaism is tries to help us remember that any moment can be mundane or sacred, and that there's so much pleasure around us.
Pleasure is not something we usually speak about in Judaism. Not as, hey, let's have a class on pleasure, or let's do a sermon on pleasure. So much of what we teach in Judaism, or at least as I was growing up, was Judaism of the mind. How do we intellectually work with these topics, prayer, whatever it might be? We never talked about our bodies, which was crazy. One of the things I recognized as I was rebuilding was how important my body was. One of the things I recognized was that I was a sexual being, and that I could, push it away, ignore it, repress it, deny it, and that wasn't going to serve me. And that led me on a deep, deep path of exploration with John and Kendra and other teachers in exploring my own sexuality, exploring my masculine energy and my feminine energy, and learning how the two danced together. And though my teacher is Buddhist, there are many teachings around sexuality through Buddhism that actually had me start to explore my own tradition and had me go back to Judaism, not that I ever left, but to go back into our text and back into our ritual and recognize that, oh, it's actually there. You just didn't talk about it.
Women's pleasure, by the way, is important. It's important for women, for men to pleasure women, and there's a whole thing around how often, depending on the job that a man has, he needs to be making sure he has sex with his wife, you know, these number of times. So for those who don't know, there is a lot in Judaism that talks about the importance of women and of women having sex and women's pleasure.
If they're not having pleasure from their husband, they can actually file for divorce. That's a legit way to do it. Um, there is much more freedom around sex and around sexuality, and part of the reason it was curbed in some societies and some generations was not our own feeling of like, oh, this is icky or this is immoral or this is not okay. It was actually from the outside, right? Outside culture, outside meaning those who weren't Jewish, who um, who said that they had these standards for sexuality, and we kind of wanted to fit in. One is we, one is
Like,
we wanted to fit in. One is we didn't want to be killed, right? We didn't want to be persecuted,
again,
and again, right? Give them one more reason, and
yep.
so hey, let's if they, whoever they happens to be at the time, is saying that these things are sexually out of bounds, let's curb that for our community too, really, so we can preserve life,
Exactly. And
which
so
makes sense. So let's talk a little bit though about Passover's coming up
yeah, yeah,
Saturday night,
yes.
or the
And
beginning of Passover Saturday night.
the whole Passover story is the end game of 400 years of slavery and oppression, intensifying, intensifying, intensifying. And then, right, intensifies with these 10 plagues. And so here we are, Passover story at midnight under the full moon is when we end up leaving Egypt, and Egypt meaning constriction, Meitzar, Tsuris, Tsar, Mitzrayim. We go into this Merkavya, into this expansiveness, and on that journey, like that's the beginning of the birth of a nation. How Passover is actually like the holiday around love and passion and sensuality and expansiveness and groundedness as the answer to the constriction.
In looking at it as the entire journey from Passover all the way to Shavuot.
Yeah.
So liberation to revelation, out of Egypt to staying in Mount Sinai, and that so many of us live in this constricted place, as you said, the Sar, the Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim, the name for Egypt is one way to play with it is comes from the word Sar, which is narrow, this narrow constricted place. And I think that one of the ways that we break through is having conversations like this about the kind of taboo subjects, But also, I think that there is a way of actually finding Mount Sinai through our sexuality. So not just having the conversation that's a breakthrough, but it's actually being in our own bodies, being in our sexuality. I think this is divine oneness. And ultimately, I think that's what's possible for sex. It's, it's finding oneness with a partner and not losing sight of your partner, but through them seeing God, through them feeling what it is to be fully seen and fully held. I think so many of us have this existential feeling of being disconnected from source. Through connection that's that deep, I think we have a chance to glimpse the oneness that so many of us are aching for. And so that's my invitation, is to start exploring sex with that. Not that we should go into sex as like, oh, here's my end goal, but that's the possibility. That's what Mount Sinai can look like for us.
And for me, that intimacy, what's really been present for me is recently is just increased awareness of how much that has to do with me knowing me first, and then making space to be curious about and wondrous, and in wondrousness about this other. But who am I and how am I showing up? I get to know it by how am I showing up. And when there's constriction around me, do I get caught up in that, or can I find expansiveness?
And let's not lose sight that it's also pleasurable.
Yes, exactly. And Judaism teaches that, like, we'll be held accountable for the pleasures we didn't, take advantage of.
And our ancestors would say that we are denying God if we're denying part of ourselves, that like the full expanse of ourselves, pleasure and depth and frivolity and seriousness. If we're denying some part of that, then we're also, ignoring what we're gifted with.